With the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, we now have 9 Spider-Man films and 2 Venom films. So today, I thought it was time for me to stop and rank all 11 Spider-Man and Venom films ranked from the worst to the best. Please note that everything that I will say in this video is just my very own opinion. My name is UsDubNation, and you are free to comment down below your very own ranking of all 11 Spider-Man and Venom films ranked from the worst to the best, just like me, or you could just do your favorite. Please don't forget to check out that Twitter that's going to pop up on your screen right now, and also that Marvel playlist. That link is always in the description, and the link will pop up above. Also, this video will have spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home spoilers will be in this video. You have been warned. And also, please note that this video is long overdue. It was actually supposed to come out on the 18th, and I was going to put out my review on the 17th. I just didn't expect No Way Home to be that good, so I had to really process my thoughts on No Way Home, write my review, and I had to put it out on the 18th. And then going into the ranking, up to the point of yesterday, I didn't see Venom 1, Venom 2, and Far From Home again. I haven't watched those 3 again. And even the day before that, I didn't even watch Into the Spider-Verse yet. So I watched Into the Spider-Verse, and then the day after that, I watched the other 3 movies that I didn't watch. And honestly, this has been, the scheduling for these videos has been bad, because I should have already been done with Spider-Man rankings. But we're now here with the first of the Spider-Man rankings. And yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into our ranking. Kicking off my list at number 11 for me has got to go to Venom. Now, last year, I actually had Venom above Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was at the bottom of my list last year. But now I've kind of come to my senses a little bit, especially after seeing No Way Home. I enjoy Venom a bit. It gets fun once the symbiote and Eddie starts bonding, and once they start communicating, and the chemistry between them is fun. But this film as a whole just doesn't make me care for the villains or the main plot. By the middle, it gets a little bit boring and bland, but thanks to the symbiote and Tom Hardy's performance, it's a film that's easily watchable for me. If I'm watching Venom, I'm gonna have a fun time with it, especially when it never felt like they were trying to do a setup movie or they was trying to set up more sequels and spin-offs. It just wanted to do its own thing, and I can appreciate it for that. Kicking off my top 10 list for me has got to go to The Amazing Spider-Man 2. A fascinating film for me because the relationships between the characters and the action, right down to the swinging and the CGI, is just amazing. Like, I love all of the action sequences inside of this film. The emotional beats hit hard. I love the character moments with Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, just their chemistry together works for me, and that's the greatest thing about this film. Mark Webb knows how to direct these relationship moments, but also knows how to direct these big action sequences and knows how to make the CGI just look flawless, in my opinion. But the setups and unnecessary plot lines just keeps this film from being all around amazing. When Amazing Spider-Man 2 was coming out, this was my most hyped movie of that year. Not Winter Soldier, not Guardians of the Galaxy, not Days of Future Past. Amazing Spider-Man 2, because this is the Spider-Man, this is my Spider-Man. This is the Spider-Man that I grew up on. So personally, this is a Spider-Man movie that I could just pop in whenever I want and have a good time with. It's probably the Spider-Man movie that just looks the best. I actually love looking at the movie rather than everything that goes on inside of it. To be honest, as a whole, this movie is a bit of a mess. At number 9 for me is Spider-Man Far From Home. I don't hate Far From Home. Honestly, I really don't. When Far From Home came out and I went to go see it with my buddies, the same buddies that I go see the movies with now, I said then that that was my favorite Spider-Man movie, and that was the best Spider-Man movie to me. I even have rankings on my other devices and my notes where I ranked this at the top of my list. I loved Spider-Man Far From Home. While it is one of the most hilarious MCU films, I mean, this movie's just funny. It's hilarious. I feel as though they really sacrificed true Spider-Man stuff for more jokes, and a film that's mostly what I like to call Peter Parker and his friends on a field trip in Europe. And when you take the character of Spider-Man that's known for being in New York and you take him to Europe, you kind of lose some of the Spider-Man-esque things. While I have my negatives, like the Edith stuff isn't really handled the best, I gotta say, Mysterio is a fantastic villain. I love Peter having PTSD from Endgame and not wanting to be Spider-Man, wanting to leave his responsibilities behind, but by the end of the film, he learns that this is his responsibility to be Spider-Man. And also, I really do love the emphasis on his Peter tingle and how this film leads into the next film, No Way Home. But as a whole, it's treated as a high school comedy first rather than a Spider-Man story. And number 8 for me has got to go to Spider-Man 3. Not as bad as people make it out to be, actually. As a whole, it's a mixed bag for me. The individual plot lines are fantastic, with Peter's pride and his relationship with MJ, the Venom stuff, the Sandman stuff with his daughter, Harry's revenge, which has been an arc that's been set up since the first Spider-Man film, the ending of that movie. I think all of those plot lines are fantastic in their own right, but put together, some get outshined than others, especially with the Harry stuff. And then also together, it becomes a convoluted mess. I think 3 plot lines could have worked here. The Venom stuff leads right into Peter's pride, and I think that they could have done a lot with the Harry plot line too, and then maybe sprinkle in a little bit of MJ and Peter's relationship troubles. I think that all could have worked here. While it isn't of the quality of the first 2 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, I gotta say Spider-Man 3, despite even the director saying it, it's anything but bad to me. At number 7 is Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. I really loved this film. I had a blast when I went to go see it. It was hilarious. It was so much fun to see it with my friends, but also just the fact that it had a shorter runtime. I thought that was perfect. It felt like they were saying to the audience, hey, our film doesn't need to be over 2 hours and 30 minutes. Our film is this long, an hour and 30 minutes. That's how much we need to tell this story, and I think it just sung. And the reason why is because of the fact that they just cut out all of the filler as well as what didn't work about the first film. And they focus more on the relationship between Eddie and Venom, which did work about the first film. I thought Cletus was a great villain, and Carnage as a symbiote really brought the carnage. He ended so many people's subscription to life inside of this film without even showing blood, essentially, without even showing R-rated material. And I think that's what makes this film work for me. And also, it feels like a smaller graphic novel story. It feels like a story that can be told in just an hour and 15 minutes. You don't need 2 hours to tell this story, because essentially it all happens in one night. And I think that works for me. While it is at number 7, Venom 2 was great to me, and a huge improvement over the first film. At number 6 for me is The Amazing Spider-Man. A weird Spidey film for me. It came out around the time The Avengers was coming out, The Dark Knight Rises was coming out. Which film was I most excited for? You would probably guess that it was The Amazing Spider-Man. I saw The Amazing Spider-Man when it came out. That was Spidey to me. When I was at school, everyone was talking about The Amazing Spider-Man. Barely anybody talked about The Avengers, about Dark Knight Rises, especially Dark Knight Rises. Everyone talked about Spider-Man. This was everyone's Spider-Man. My friend's Spider-Man. This was everyone's Spider-Man, essentially, when I was growing up. So, in my opinion, I got a little bit of biasness towards this film because it is basically kind of my introduction to Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2 is the first Marvel movie, the first superhero movie I think I've ever seen. But The Amazing Spider-Man is the one that really, truly got me into Spider-Man. It's a lot darker in terms of tone and lighting than the previous incarnations. And also the emphasis on Peter's parents is just weird and unneeded for me. But really, those are my only negatives. This film is greatly casted. Mark Webb directs this film with such a tone that feels based in verisimilitude and realism. It feels grounded. The cast's chemistry, Andrew Garfield's and Emma Stone's, for example, is just so great. The best chemistry for a Spidey couple, in my opinion. The swinging is great, the action is fun, and the CGI is exceptional. A fine adaptation that struggles a bit to find its identity in the end, and they did something different with the character, and I thought that was pretty okay. Kicking off my top 5 list for me has got to go to the original Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2002. This film is so influential as well as great, in my opinion. When I rewatched this film, a lot of emotions spew out of me because I'm like, this movie is just great. Though the Green Goblin, as a villain, I really do like him. I think William Dafoe does play the Green Goblin greatly, especially in No Way Home. But inside of this film, he's kind of like a cartoonish, episodic villain from a TV show. And that's simply how his shenanigans play inside of the film. Negatives aside, it is a classic Spider-Man origin story, and through the classic comic book events, you get to see the spider biting him, you get to see the wrestling matches, you see how his actions caused Uncle Ben's death, and how much guilt falls over him to where he wants to live up to the saying, with great power comes great responsibility, by becoming Spider-Man. It's just a simple hero's journey that just happens to be the most influential of the superhero genre. It's fun, it's bright, it's vibrant. Sam Raimi's direction is cheesy, it's corny, but since I do love early 2000 films, I gotta say, I loved all of that. This is still, in my opinion, the standard for origin Spider-Man films. Coming in at number 4 for me has got to go to the newest installment of the Spider-Man franchise, Spider-Man No Way Home. This film, I really did love it. I loved it. I enjoyed my time at the theater with it. But I gotta say, the setup for this film is very cheap and very lazy. I don't really buy into it as that much. And also, the Pokemon catching... Spider-Man... Listen, I'm joking. Listen, Spider-Man No Way Home is not at number 4. Okay, I was just making sure you were still paying attention. Coming in at my real number 4 is Spider-Man Homecoming. One of the most refreshing Spider-Man films, as well as one of the most refreshing and rewatchable MCU films. Homecoming is so much fun. By actually making Spider-Man a high schooler and giving him real high school problems like going to detention, or is he going to find a date to homecoming, or going to high school parties. I think all of that works. And since he is in the MCU, we get to see more neighborhood level stuff. And through those characters, we get to see the scope and the world of the MCU through their eyes. It's a great coming of age story that gives him the idea of being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, as well as responsibility. The only reason why I have it a little bit lower is because I've seen it so many times, and because he's not really Spider-Man by the end, as we can see inside of No Way Home. I do love the Vulture as a villain, he's a great villain, but the shadow of Iron Man, and with Far From Home too, just looms over this character until we get into No Way Home. Kicking off my top 3 list for me has got to go to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, when they first came out with trailers and teasers for this film, I thought it was pretty cool, because my knowledge of Miles came from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, as well as the Lego Marvel game. So I thought, oh cool, a black Spider-Man. And going into the film, that's what I thought. Oh, it's just a black Spider-Man. Miles Morales is a fascinating character, and it was one of the first times, even with Black Panther coming out earlier that year, those two movies were some of the first times where I felt, wow, representation, and seeing a character like Black Panther or like Spider-Man and seeing my skin tone in that suit is great to me. And I'm pretty sure it's probably amazing to everyone else. I think Into the Spider-Verse is a really great film. I can't really think of any big negatives apart from the fact that I've seen it so many times. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse to me is just a comic book brought to life. And in terms of the character, this is a love letter to Spider-Man. And all the references and all the jokes inside of this film are based on the universal love of Spider-Man. Miles dealing with the pressure of expectations and being Spider-Man and dealing with the responsibility that comes with that, and how he can be unique, is amazing to me. The creativity in the animation, making it seem like it's a comic book, and if you pause the film, each frame has something dynamic about it. Kingpin as a villain is a sympathetic villain. I love all of that, but also going back to Miles and his relationship with his uncle, his relationship with his father, and how those two contrast. You're given so much development to this character of Miles that you want to see him in live action. And personally, I can't wait for the sequel. Into the Spider-Verse is still a great film that offers the idea that anybody could be under the mask. You could be white, black, girl, or boy. It doesn't matter who's under the mask because the mask is just a symbol. Spider-Man could be anybody. And that's what I love about the character. And they emphasize that. My runner-up at number 2 for me has got to go to Spider-Man No Way Home, the newest installment in the Spider-Man franchise. And I know going into this, you expected No Way Home to be at number 1. And it's not at number 1 for me. Actually, this was intended to be at number 3. But because of how I felt about Into the Spider-Verse, and because this is a new release, and I am still in the honeymoon phase, I have seen this film 2 times now. The most hyped film for the latter half of this year was a fantastic, amazing theatrical experience that overtook my favorite theatrical experience, Infinity War, as my favorite, if you get what I'm saying. No Way Home is now my favorite theatrical experience, and I will remember December 17th for ages. Jon Watts managed to deliver the MCU Spider-Man film that I've wanted for years and finally gave Tom Spidey something we thought we already had, an origin story. He finally gets to have the emotional moments. He finally gets to be true Spider-Man by the end of the film. The emotional beats hit. While Aunt May's death didn't hit me as much as I wish it did, I think all of these surprises, Andrew and Toby showing up in the final battle, my favorite superhero, Daredevil, showing up in Spider-Man No Way Home, and it's the same actor from the Netflix series that is my favorite live-action show of all time. I felt emotional for that. The cameos and appearances, they all were awesome. All around, this film is a crowd pleaser and is definitely the best MCU Spidey film. And because of this film, I'm more excited to see what Jon Watts do with the Fantastic Four. He delivered some great action, better action than the first 2 films, and all around a better story. But the first act with its spell and its setup is very weak and cheap. But moving on into the second and third act, it's some of the best things that we've ever seen inside of the MCU and out of all of the Spider-Man film. At the end of the day, if you take out all the fan service moments, it still stands on its own as a great Spider-Man story. The fan service moments are just an enhancement. But in fact, I would even argue that the fan service serves narrative purpose for this Spider-Man, as well as even more organic than Avengers Endgame's fan service. And I love Avengers Endgame fan service. But Spider-Man No Way Home might have gotten the biggest reaction out of me. But coming in at my number 1 for me has got to go as Spider-Man 2. I mean, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is still the best Spider-Man film to me. It just works. The idea of responsibility versus choice is a weight on Peter in this film. I love the fact that Peter's trying to live a double life. He's struggling to live the double life. He can't get to class on time. He can't pay his bills on time. He can't keep a job. And all the while, he's still trying to keep it together and fulfill his responsibilities as being Spider-Man. But every time Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses. I think thematically it works that he loses his powers due to his psychological problems. And I think that due to his psychological stress and everything that happens to him inside of this film, leading up to the point where he ultimately gives up the mantle of Spider-Man, warrants him that choice of giving up the mantle of Spider-Man until he goes into that fire building as Peter Parker and saves that little girl, and then choosing to become Spider-Man again for that awesome train sequence. And honestly, I just think that what Sam Raimi did with this film, showing us a clear line between responsibility and choice, and that Peter Parker chooses to be Spider-Man and chooses to have this responsibility, I think all of it works
Also,
here. Let's not forget about Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. The villain is just so great because he is a victim of his own intelligence, just like the Green Goblin. But here, I just find his performance a little bit better than the Green Goblin's in that case. Sam Raimi decided to have a more deeper emotional focus for our characters, as well as improve on the original with a better script and just more character-focused writing, especially focusing on the character of Peter Parker. We spend this entire film with Peter Parker rather than with Spider-Man. And I think all of that makes for a nice, relatable story that is, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man film. This is why Spider-Man 2 has to come in at number 1. Alright guys, that is it for the ranking. Please note that everything that I did say in this video was just my very own opinion. My list was certainly not the right list, it was just my list. And you are free to comment down below your ranking of all 11 Spider-Man and Venom films ranked from the worst to the best, just like me. Or you could just do your favor, or you can even exclude the Venom films. You could just include only the Spider-Man films. Please don't forget to check out that Twitter that's going to pop up on your screen right now, and also that Marvel playlist. That link is in the description. Come back for more Spider-Man rankings in the near future, and with that being said, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Peace.